Good evening. It's now 5:30 and I call to order the workshop of the Victoria City Council. Our workshops are informal, so we'll get started. We have just one item on the workshop agenda this evening, which is our proposed 2025 fees and charges discussion. Kicking us off this evening is Assistant City Manager Tricia Pollock. Ms. Pollock, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. As the mayor said, we're going to be discussing the 2025 fees and charges for services. And in addition, we're going to review our ARPA, American Rescue Plan funds, and also talking about our 2025 budget and levy. This will be the last workshop before we present the max tax levy to you in September. Starting with fees and services, our sources of revenue are primarily taxes. So 84% are property taxes and a small amount of franchise fee for our cable. And 14% are charges for services, so such as permits, licenses, and then other sources would include some interest and some other miscellaneous refunds and reimbursements. How we determine our revenues and fees can be based off of a few different sets of criteria. So one is the market comparisons. We set our fees at the upper quartile of the market. Some fees are set by external sources such as our building permits, and then others may be set by a cost recovery method so that they can be self-supporting where possible. This is our revenues that include the fees and charges for services. This slide shows the 3-year average for fees, and also the new building permits, you'll notice, are showing quite an increase, and the plan check fees as well. And that's because we are going to be basing those fees off of 144 new home permits, where in 2024 we were at 130. So having those additional permits increases our fees. We are also projecting facility rentals and recreation fees to increase due to the number of participants, and also an increase on our interest income due to a trend in higher interest rates. While we know that we don't know what those interest rates will do, however, we do anticipate to have somewhat of a higher revenue from those interest rates. Do you have any questions about any specific one of these line items? Just
Council, any questions? Anything jump out at you that you want to bring up here?
I know it's a lot of information. So
I just have a quick comment. I would have a little bit of reticence of thinking that interest income that we're going to make is going to be the same. I think that it's been clear that short-term interest rates are projected to take a dive. There's a lot of conjecture that there might be 3 cuts in this remaining year of 2024 by short-term rates regulated by the Fed. And if the employment situation continues on the path that it's been on for the past couple months, there's going to be a propensity for them to lower rates. So I would suggest that we be cautious on what we're forecasting in that, so that we don't find ourselves counting money that we potentially don't have.
yeah, I agree, Councilmember Ivansky. So as you can see, because we'd had such some volatile lower interest rates in some more recent years, our budget was only $30,000 for interest for 2024. Right now we're closer to like $200,000. So I felt like $80,000 was still being conservative. While it looks like a $50,000 increase is significant, I don't think that $80,000 is necessarily too high of a number.
And you said we're at over $200,000 for this,
Right around, yeah.
for this year.
And we have been able to buy some fairly decent CDs with this higher rate. So we have some investments that are going to hold us through 2025 with some of those higher rates. So, which is good. It's good to be able to purchase a few of those CDs while we can get them at 4 or 5%.
Council, other questions, comments?
So when we look at these proposed increases in fees, these first 4 are community development fees, and they are new fees. So the zoning compliance letter, city staff reviews the property records, issues zoning compliance letters, and outlines relevant zoning information. Since we currently are not doing that, we are proposing to have a fee for that for cost recovery. That escrow, basically for that same reason, the escrow would be refunded if it wasn't used, so that fee would just be for the time that is spent on that zoning ordinance. And then the minor subdivision escrow, again, that's a cost recovery, and if it's not used, it will be returned. And the rezoning escrow, the same. So those 4 are new. And then that 5th one, the community development, the service rates surcharge for staff expenses in excess of the application fee. So those are cost recovery fees that we would bill back for those above the application fee services. And because our staff wages have increased, we haven't had an increase or an adjustment to these in quite some time. So this is basically to catch up for the actual cost recovery rate. Public Works, same thing, just adjusting those rates to catch up with the increase in wages and benefits that the city's paying for that labor, and then administration. So those 3 items are all cost recovery related.
And we currently use those? We currently charge those fees? This is just an adjustment to what that fee is?
Exactly, yeah, those 3. So like if we have like a data request that we end up having to spend more time on, then we would bill for that service according to our fee schedule. And so we're making an adjustment to that based on our wages and benefits and the actual costs.
On these new fees that you're proposing at the top, say a little bit more about those. Is that common for, I mean, I would assume we took a look at our market cities to see if they were, if they were charging those kinds of fees.
Yeah.
I'm sensitive to this because we are a developing community and we want to attract that development. We don't want to deter people from doing that because of these extra fees. So curious about that and how our market cities and others around us.
Yeah, good question, Mayor. So Jen and her staff did do some research to where they came up with these fees and gave me some examples. This may not be all inclusive of all of the research they did, but for example, Belle Plaine charges $50 for that letter. Waconia is $30, Shorewood is $50, Carver is $25, Arden Hills is $75, and Chan is $65. So they decided on $50. Again, with the escrows, other cities, Waconia, Shorewood, Arden Hills, were all at between $500 and $1,500 for those escrows. And then between $1,000 and $2,000 on the minor subdivision escrows. So,
So for the most part, we went in the middle.
yeah, for the most part, we're in the middle to upper edge. But like I said, with the escrows, that's just an amount that they're going to give us. They're going to get refunded if we don't spend the time on that task or that process. So it could be that if it went over that, then we would bill at that rate as you see in the lower section on line 5, then we would bill additional services at that rate above the $1,000, but it's just an amount that we ask them for, and then we'll determine. Everything can take different amount of work depending on what it is.
So it's at our discretion whether we can operate within, so if it's standard and straightforward, we would probably refund the $1,000 escrow. At what point do we kind of determine what's appropriate, what's not appropriate? Can you give me an example of that?
Dana has an example.
Yeah, Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you. Mayor, members of the council, before I answer that question, maybe a little bit of additional context into this. So we do run a fairly lean community development department, so especially in a growing community, and with that, we've been spending a lot of time on, I'll call them like these onesie-twosie evaluations and looking at different things. They take a lot of staff time, and they're not necessarily there's not necessarily the statutory time clock that comes with it like these other development proposals. And so we're trying to balance, in some ways we're trying to recover our costs because our staff is stretched thin, and we've been prioritizing those larger developments that have those statutory timelines related to them. So we still want to be able to get to these things, but it does deviate our attention from some of these other things to work on those items. So this was kind of part of that discussion and solution, and just being able to collect an escrow up front. It also it kind of helps. The word that's coming to mind is tire kicker. It's not necessarily tire kicker. I'm having a hard time finding the words tonight, but we just want to make sure that we're using staff time wisely, and we can certainly, if there's something that's very straightforward, I think our team is very good in making that judgment, and we would not collect that escrow. But there are some things that might have a little bit more layers of complexity to that, and I think that's when we would collect that escrow. And as Trish noted, we would return the escrow, whatever the balance is that we're not using. So
I think the heartburn for me here is, how much staff time are we buying for $1,000? Does this person get 10 hours of our staff time? Do they get 5 hours of our staff time? It feels
certainly.
It doesn't feel very objective. It feels very subjective.
But isn't we're going to have to do the work, or potentially, right? So we're just asking for the payment up front, and we do the work, and if it's less money than what we took from them, we give it back. If it's more, we'll end up billing them more, right? So it's just saying, like, you want to come in and do this, right? Like, we need this up front, and if it's like, and then we'll do the work, and if it's less, then we'll give you your money back, and if it's more, to me, I don't think this is going to dissuade people from coming, right? Like, we're talking about a small amount of money for when they're building multi-million-dollar developments.
Right.
And it's based upon this hourly rate, right? 70 for professional, 50 for clerical. So you get up to, 15 to 20 hours of time for that $1,000.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah, makes sense. Yep. Okay.
Okay, so continuing on, we're looking at the Victoria Recreation Center and some fee changes. The gymnasium they're proposing a half-court rental. They've only had a full-court rental, so this would be just half of what the full-court rental is, which is $40. So just adding that option in there. The birthday party package, they're removing that bundled option. They're just going to do it a la carte for what each person and party chooses. The multi-purpose room, they have a rate for if you want either room A or room B, or you can rent both A and B. So those are new, the way they have that structured. And then the park, Lions Park Pavilion rental, all of the different levels, whether it's weekday, weekend, or resident, non-resident, or nonprofit, the rates are going up. Generally, most rates will be up $50. There's one that's going up, I think, a little bit less, the weekend rate for the nonprofits. Any questions on those changes?
I would just say with the Lions Park Pavilion rental, I mean, it's always busy, so I don't think this is going to probably dissuade people from using it, but I do think we should be cognizant of, right, like it's a great community place to use. It's, I mean, almost every night, like I know from experience, you pretty much have to get online at midnight the year before you want to book it, right, and to get your day that you want. So I don't think it's going to affect that, but we should be careful, like I guess in the future, right, how much we raise that so that our residents are able to, you know, take advantage of that great space.
Agree. Okay. Then for Parks and Rec, there is a adjustment to the cancellation and refund fee from $5 to $15 as for cost recovery. Even to issue a check, it costs more than the $5. So changing that process. And then the community gardens, it's a new small plot fee. They base that off a market at $40. And then all of these, the rest of these recreation center rates are all changes to the structure and how, compared to how we're currently billing our members. So they're revising it to increase efficiencies and how they manage their membership. So both an employee and the patron side, it will be an advantage for. So the yearly memberships are going to be eliminated. So with our new online format, they are able to have the same feel as an annual membership, but also will have the freedom being able to cancel or pause a membership throughout the year. So it doesn't require new patrons to renew a membership every year. It will automatically renew month to month. They're also getting rid of what we had was a gold membership, which gave other access and benefits to the member, and they're just opening up those benefits to all members. So it simplifies it. Everybody will have access to the fitness center, the gym, the group fitness classes, locker rooms, and open skate. And then they also have created one discounted rate for youth, active duty military, and senior members. So really that is the biggest change you're going to see, is that we don't have those annual membership rates anymore.
How does that work for somebody who has an annual membership today? Meaning, does it just go till their expiration?
Alyssa might know the answer to that, because I'm not really sure how they've decided to handle that.
I can
Ms.
speak to
Nelson,
that.
please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council Member, for your question. Yes, just how you predicted, we would wait until their annual membership is expired and then transition them to this new rate structure.
Makes sense. Thank you.
And then we're going to discuss utility rates and any changes that we make to utility rates. Discuss our enterprise fund budgets discussion in November. So this is all we have for those changes. Utility franchise fees. So this slide is looking at our utility franchise fees. This is the electric and gas franchise fees. It's a 10-year projection, so 2025 through 2034. In 2031, our original undergrounding debt service will be paid off. So most of our increases that you see on that right-hand set, that higher fund balance really starts to build more after that debt service is paid off, so after 2031. And then just to kind of give you an order of magnitude, so our Steiger Lake Lane West project that we did undergrounding on, the cost is about $640,000 to do that stretch. So right now we're projecting about $250,000 fund balance at the end of 2025. So we're really looking at starting to build some of that fund balance up in case we have another project that comes along, knowing how large those projects can be and how expensive. We're looking to start to try and rebuild that up a little bit, and then without recommending any changes to the increasing the franchise fees.
Trish, does this also take into account the increase in population
It does.
that we're projecting? Okay, great. All right, any questions on this? Okay.
Then we're going to move on to the 2025 general fund budget and levy. So the June preliminary budget levy projection was originally 7.49 when we talked in June. After the guidance that council gave to staff at that workshop to try to even out the year-over-year levy increases, we are now proposing a max tax levy of 12.47%. So what changed? So the Highway 5 transportation projects and the fire station debt service payments are driving the levy increases for the years 2025 through 2027. So we've increased the long-term street maintenance fund transfer by $400,000, which does reduce that levy increase in 2026 by about 10%. So we were originally looking at about 24% with that 7.49% original increase for 25. Now, adding in that $400,000 to the long-term street maintenance fund, we're able to go up to 12.47 and then 14.65. So it really evens out that increase quite significantly. What else changed from June? So additionally, the change in the projected tax rate from June will be about 0.55%, which is lower than what we had originally anticipated. And the reason is we did get some numbers from the county last week that is showing us a higher than expected fiscal disparities number. So we should be receiving about $92,000 additional dollars that we in comparison to 2024. So that affects that tax rate in a favorable way. So unfavorable changes to the budget since June include an increase in the Carver County assessor and prosecution contracts, and also anticipated higher increase to our health insurance. So we had originally budgeted in June, we had about a 7% increase, but from talking with our brokers, they're suspecting that they're going to come in closer to like maybe 20% at the high end and probably at least 15%. So we're going to go into max tax at a 20%, and then hopefully we'll be able to lower that when we get our final numbers in October. What we want to just make sure that we're covered going into max tax.
Okay, this is saying we're budgeting for 13% increase?
The 12.47, yeah.
Mayor, members of the council, I can clarify that for you. That's a plus 13 on top of our 7%. So we're adding an additional 13%
Yes.
Thank you.
to the projection.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Yes. So home value tax rates. So I just listed a range of different home values and between $300,000 home to $1.5 million home. And as you can see, the anticipated annual increase at that 12.47% levy increase and a 30.37% tax rate gives you about a $59 to just under $300 a year increase in taxes on those home values. So the general fund levy includes both operating expenditures and transfers. And the operating expenditures are going up about $90,000 or 1.4%, where the transfers are going up approximately $2 million, most of which is going into the long-term street maintenance fund for those road projects we talked about. Our debt service levy is going down slightly, about $178,000, and then overall the total city levy projected to be about $9 million, with a projected increase of about $1 million.
Okay, so just to clarify here, that transfer into the long-term street maintenance is what we're collecting this year to even out the debt for 26. So that money will stay there. It will be used for our long-term, for the road projects that we've got going on. Just want to clarify. Thank you.
Yes. This is our updated projection, so you can see here with the 12.47, estimating 14.65 in 26, and then 27, 14.38. That gets us past those initial bonding years on issuing that debt, and then we shouldn't anticipate to have to bond for anything else until we get into like where we'll be bonding for our water treatment plant, and then that will be in our enterprise fund, so that will not affect these projections. So the city tax levy process, as you know, the city can still lower the levy after max tax is approved in September, but we cannot increase it. So we are required by state law to have a max tax levy certified to the county before September 30th. Now we're going to do a quick review. I know you've seen some of these numbers before, but I just wanted to, since we're coming to the end of our American Rescue Plan funds spending and planning process, kind of do a quick review of where we've been, what we're doing now, and what we still have planned to do. So in 2022, we received about $1.1 million in ARPA funds. We've been able to complete several projects, primarily in the water and sewer departments, these projects that we did not have in our budget to do. So it has given us a very significant positive effect on our operations for our utilities departments. So you may have seen, like I said, many of these projects mentioned in the past. But I just wanted to go through them in case anybody had any questions. These projects that you see on here have been finished. And then these are the projects from 2023 that we did last year. So a couple of them there, the water treatment plant, effluent and influent meters, that was a partial completion. That has now been completed in 24. And then the water treatment plant remodel, that was partial, that has also been completed. And we did significant improvements to our fiber and security for our booster stations and our well 3 and our water tower. So 2024 year-to-date, we've been super busy making some significant purchases for our utilities departments. So we have to have all the money spent by the end of this year or under contract. If it's under contract at the end of 24, we have till end of 2026 to spend it. But it has to be under contract. So we're expecting to spend all the money this year. But they do have a couple of items on this last page that are under contract. Those top two items, those are remaining work that has to be done. And then there's a couple of items, the booster station upgrade, and then a jetter head for our new 6-inch drain tile. Those items are estimated. We're planning to do them. And then we have a few items that have been ordered. So we're just waiting for the delivery on them, which include the items for our lift station 19 upgrade and our solids pump replacement and our easement reel. So we're estimating interest earnings on this money to be right now it's around 38,000. So if you add that into what we have left, we have approximately $160,000 remaining, which staff is recommending using that money to replace all of our park signs. Our communications department has gotten an estimate for signs that the cost would be about $111,000 if we replaced all the signs at once. If we didn't buy all of the signs at once, the price would go up 25% or about $28,000 to kind of do them in different phases. And we don't have an exact quote on install yet because they haven't done a site visit, but with the bases, it would be give or take $50,000. So we think that amount between the install and the sign cost would use up the rest of that ARPA dollars.
And I trust that's a permitted use for those dollars.
Yes. It's not in our budget. And we're not doing it to reduce the levy, which are the two things that we can't use that money for.
Council, questions, comments on this?
On the ARPA piece, or?
Yeah, the ARPA piece.
Yeah, let's stick to the ARPA piece for the moment. Okay. Okay. All is good there? All right, moving on.
Then I have my council discussion slide to ask, does council agree with the proposed changes to the revenues, fees, and charges?
Okay, let's start there. Councilmember Evansky, does your question fit under that?
We brought this up before. I think we still have time. I would like on our fee schedule to examine increasing our park dedication fees. It seems that the projects that we've been seeing are routinely coming in where developers are not giving us land for these developments and just kicking the can down the road on saying, let me pay your fees, let me pay your fees, let me pay your fees. So that feels like we don't have the right sweet spot balance between where we could get the dedication in terms of land in places that we just routinely see, hey, we're not doing a park here because there's one that's far away or relatively close. And if we have a captive audience, I think, in terms of where development is coming from, it's coming in. There's other places around us where there's less available space. And I think if everybody just keeps hitting pay the fee, it seems to suggest that we probably have some room to take a look at that and bring in, if we're going to not get the land, which once the development's in, there's no land fairy to come by and sprinkle it on. So I think that it begs the question, where are we at in terms of our neighbors? And I don't really have won't lose sleep at night if we're on the higher end. I mean, I think that it's our one chance to get it. We're going to look at a sketch plat tonight where that very topic comes up, where the developer wants to pay parkland dedication fees. So I'd like us to examine that if we have an opportunity to raise revenues in that area, that we push the envelope there.
Okay. Why am I thinking in my gut that that's set by statute? Is that correct? Ms. Hardy? Or,
Dana can
yeah,
comment.
Ms. Hardy, please.
So, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. There's actually been a lot of discussion around park dedication fee at the legislature and within the different city policy committees. And I think it would probably be beneficial. I hear what you're saying. I think there's a lot of budget pressure for developing parks and putting in the amenities that the community wants to see. And we're feeling that as we start to develop those parks out with what community members want in those areas. So I think there's certainly an opportunity to talk about all the different, like kind of a park dedication 101 as part of our next budget discussion as we talk about the park capital piece. I think that would fit really nicely into that. I think our city attorney probably wants to weigh in on some of that because there are some very prescriptive legislative things that we must follow when we're considering park dedication. So I think there's a really good opportunity to have a conversation around that as part of our next budget conversation this fall.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I would like to hear from my council colleagues those development fees that are being proposed, those new development fees. I'm kind of feeling like that's kind of the cost of doing business for a city who is under development. And just curious from my council colleagues how they feel about that.
So you're questioning where we're at on perhaps the appropriateness of us?
Yeah, I feel like.
Go for a cost recovery?
Yeah, I feel like, we've got a great staff and I understand we're pretty lean, but oftentimes those proposals can, even though that one might not work, it's good for us to make those connections to that development community and maybe be able to pull them in again at a future date. And I feel like that's sort of the cost of doing business and that's part of being a growing city. So that's kind of my opinion on it, but curious about other thoughts.
I mean, I guess I would agree that it's the cost of doing business, and I mean, I think we just have to be cognizant, right? Because we've seen the housing first letters and such, right? To make sure that we're not on the radar of overcharging type thing. But I mean, I think we've tried to do a good job of staying in the middle, right? Or so.
Well, I think what staff has proposed here feels like a good balance between not collecting anything for these almost, dare I say, time-wasting efforts of them. They work hard and they're trying to drive development, and these kind of things sap them from those abilities to get those things done. Our neighbors have imposed similar structures, and we're certainly, from what I heard tonight, priced in the middle. So I'm comfortable with them going and finding these places for revenue. We talk about revenue all the time. We constantly go over this. We're inextricably linked to property taxes. We hear from our residents that are saying, I want grocery stores so that can be tax revenues. I'm tired of paying property taxes. You don't develop a new business to bring in taxes. So here's an opportunity to recover costs, not necessarily drive revenue. I think that it makes a lot of sense. And then many of us are old enough to remember the television commercial with Fram oil filter man, pay me now or pay me later. If we continue to keep absorbing these things, then next year we're going to be sitting around saying, why are the budgets going up? Because staff is telling us that we need to add more people resources to keep up with the load of the demands that are being placed on the city. So I think it makes sense to have cost recovery and have the potential for a little bit, I think, of a tap the brakes on these sort of, hey, this might cost me a bit. Maybe I need to think twice about going forward with my proposal on wasting time, you know. And so I think that these things represent a balance of reducing that moral hazard and, you know, bringing our budget back into a little bit better revenue position.
Thanks. Other thoughts?
I think if it's justifiable and clear, and it is a qualification in a sense of these, I'm okay with this approach. But I don't want to be on the other end of what they call nickel and diming and things like that. So I think the way it was explained, if I'm understanding, is that's an upfront fee. But again, if the hours aren't spent, you're going to get that back, right? And if that is the approach, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Mayor, members of the council, I don't have clear consensus yet. I've heard two concerns and two comfort with those. And we certainly have we typically don't adopt our fee schedule until the end of the year, so there's certainly time for you to think through that, but I just wanted to let you know at this time I don't have clear consensus on
I guess if I wasn't clear, I'm supportive of this, so.
So,
you are or aren't.
I am
Oh,
supportive
then
of
that,
what we.
then
you do.
I,
Okay. Very good. Thanks.
But lastly, how do we feel about, you know, what we're seeing as what I'm interpreting, and help me if I'm not, that we're seeing some fiscal disparities coming in higher than we anticipated, and so are we now looking to sort of offset that by lowering the tax rate with that? Is that the net result of where this is at?
Yeah, Councilmember Evansky, that affects really just affects our tax rate. So we usually just project whatever we had the prior year because we don't really know. Sometimes it goes up a little bit, sometimes it goes down a little bit. We don't know necessarily what all the other communities are doing for commercial business. So what we get from other communities, basically what our share of the pot is, as they might say, it's really hard to predict. It's really impossible for us to predict. So it could go down again next year, but we just project it to remain steady.
I mean, it's sort of there's a part of where my head is, you know, it's just the two-headed monster. One side says, "Hey, this is great that we can lower our tax rate." The other side says, "When we looked at this last, we seemed reasonably comfortable with letting our tax rate rise, so that we are good stewards about the future, where we're not having this surprise bump, and people just really come in with a massive amount of hatred of like, why did my tax bill go up so high?" So I think we were last time willing to stomach the bad medicine now and have things, you know, increase maybe a little bit more or increase to the edge of our comfort level with it, and say, you know, that we're making good decisions about where the future is. So in that vein, I'm almost of the opinion that we go back to where we were and use this essentially windfall and fiscal disparity to plug into what we're going to need to pay for these road improvements that are coming for Highway 5. It's no secret to us here that live in Victoria that a lot of this traffic that's going through here are essentially for other communities to make their way through Victoria and, you know, certainly benefit our own residents. But if we can have fiscal disparities come in and fund some of that, and we have what we originally projected for running Victoria and delivering the services that we thought, I'm inclined to try to move that fiscal disparities into the city of Victoria's favor, you know, and go with what we felt was where we wanted to set the tax rate before this. We do have a fire station that we're going to talk about tonight that is expensive, and that's going to have to come from our residents as well. Now, we're a growing community, we need that fire station, we need to keep our citizens safe. That is something that we will have to spend money on, but I am also just really reticent about what's happening in the future, and we know that these projects are gonna come in more expensive than we think, and those levy increases are probably gonna be larger than we're projecting now. I would like to see us be able to use this opportunity here to be prudent like we thought we were, and have those really flow into these road projects for us.
Okay, Ms. Hardy, you have something to say about that?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So as you're thinking through what Councilmember Ivansky is saying, I just wanted to let you know that what's within your control, and that's the levy. And so to do what Councilmember Ivansky, what I think you're recommending to do would be to increase that, to increase the proposed levy, so from 12.47 to something a little bit higher to get to that, to whatever amount is to get back to that original tax rate. So we can certainly do that. If there's consensus to do that, direction to do that, and that would just mean that we would bring you something that is higher than the 12.47 that we're proposing tonight.
Council, thoughts on that? I understand, saying this is not money we planned for, this is a windfall, let's take this money that we haven't planned for and park it into this long-term streets fund where we can use it to pay for these things that are coming up, which would increase our levy. I'm uncomfortable with the number of our levy increase, and even though I completely understand why we're doing it, to increase it even further.
If you kick the can down the road, you're looking at a 22 to 24% increase. Chaska's seen those 3 or 4 times over the last 12 years. Do you want a 20% increase in one given year, or do you want a flatter? We planned for this versus we got to pay for it now.
Yeah, this is why
your
we're going to
And I
the
think
higher
that's,
increase.
I thought that's why we were
currently.
going from the
Yep.
7.49 to the 12.47,
That is correct.
right?
That is correct.
And then the 14.65.
Yep, that is correct.
So to flatten that,
Right, so we don't have those big spikes.
A little over 3.5% is a lot easier to stomach than 15%, because people go, "What the hell are you doing? What did you do with our money? Why are we not better prepared for this spike?" So that's the choice we have. We either plan for where we're going or we don't. And by 2028, if we hold to our numbers, we take a 11% decrease. Anywhere between 5 and 11% on a decrease in 4 years, in what would roughly be 4 years, has people applauding. So I don't think you see that if you do a 22 to 24% increase, which is what I think is going to sit at. If we see interest rates drop, and we're not getting back what we need on interest and some of the other things. While we grow, maybe offset some of that, but projections going out next 4 years, there's no way that I would gamble on things getting better, because it seems every 10 years there's something new we've got to overcome, going back to 1999 for municipal governments. So that's where you're at. I mean, you went from the tech bubble bursting to the housing bubble bursting to COVID. That's the last 30 years in how we're doing. So you're looking at 2032 probably for the next issue to come around. So if we haven't planned for that, we're probably not in a good position. So I would say flattening it as best we can over the next 3 years. The next 3 budget cycles would be in the city's best interest, residents' best interest, and then 2028 we're looking we increase it, let's say we do it 8%, we're still 6% from 2027. So that's just me.
So you're agreeing with Greg saying that we should raise 12.47 up a little bit?
No, I would leave it. I wouldn't reduce it any and increase the numbers for any other year. You're going to
I
increase.
think you're saying to raise it though from 12, right? But we wouldn't touch the next 2 years, right? Because we have the windfall. Is that what I was wondering?
Yeah, essentially, when we looked at this last, we had an idea of how much this would increase, and while we all had some degree of heartburn over it, we said that this is going to, get us to a place where we don't have these larger moves out in the future. Now, what I think I understand is that we are not going to do that. We're going to go lower than what we talked about last time because we had this $96,000 that's coming in from fiscal disparities. And my position is like, let's go back to the rate that we were comfortable moving towards, and then essentially use this fiscal disparities to have that much bigger and big budget that will then be able to move more into transfers to cover where these higher expenses are going to come in, and potentially, like essentially maybe lower that 14.65% to maybe 13.5%. I don't know what the numbers are, but
Yeah.
I think we maybe by the we don't have to make this decision today, but like let's look and see what that looks like next time we meet on this, so that we can make an informed decision about that.
And can we look
My
at both?
initial lean is that we had a number that we came to, a great deal of consensus with, and now we seem to be going the other way. I want to balance this the right way. I want us to be thinking about our future, even though it might be a little bit more. Even though we're being given an opportunity, so to speak, that we didn't know about before.
So maybe what we need to do is go back to that, what has changed since June, since our last conversation. So we went from the 7.49, what was initial, up to the 7.47.
12.47.
I'm sorry, 12.47, thank you. Because we wanted to level out those future increases. So, so we were going to go to 14.65, and with the changes, we got down to 12.47. Does that seem right?
So
Oh, no, that's
the
14.
2026 levy was the increase with the concern. It was looking to be 24.68. Most of that increase is because of the issuance of the debt service for the fire station and then the Downtown West Phase 1 road project. So in order to level out the 25 and 26 levies, we increased the street maintenance fund by $400,000, and then we were able to flatten that a little bit. So it's 14.65.
Okay, so I don't know, to answer your question, Councilmember Evansky, I'm not sure that we knew what that number was before we said, yeah, we do want to even that out. Can you move to the next slide that shows how much more we got in fiscal disparities, or the back slide?
Yes.
Here we go. So maybe the question is what is our net gain from fiscal disparities after all this other stuff?
So it's hard to say with the health insurance piece right now. So, so our current tax rate is like 28.4, if my memory serves me. So we were looking at an increased tax rate when we talked in June at like 29.82. So we're looking at like a 1.4% increase from over 24. So this slide is just showing what the effects of that fiscal disparities does to that tax rate. So it directly affects the tax rate. So while yes, we can increase the levy by putting more money into the long-term street maintenance fund, it would maybe put the tax rate up at about maybe 31%-ish. So then you're looking at a 28 to 31% increase. So I guess if that 3/4 of a percentage, roughly, I'm just kind of working numbers in my brain, so not exactly, but if that's comfortable, I mean, we can certainly do that.
So what I'm hearing is, my understanding is, we can't really take this pot of money and move it over here like we'd like to.
How often are fiscal disparities favorable? Meaning, how many years are we favorable in
Yeah.
the last 10 versus how many years are unfavorable?
That's a good question. I can go back and pull up that information and get that out to you. I know it went down slightly from 23 to 24, but we were seeing kind of a steady increase, not like huge jumps. I mean, I feel like this year was like a larger increase than we've normally have seen, but I can go and pull the data to give you some more solid numbers.
And is this, if that's money we can count on, then maybe we can do something a little bit different with it. But I still wouldn't count on a fiscal disparity to even out a budget.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Okay. All right. Other questions, comments? Do we want to proceed with a max tax of 12.47, or do we want to look at something a little bit higher?
I think we should look at something a little bit higher. We have until our next workshop to do it. Let's have the two side by side and evaluate the direction we should go.
Okay, I'm not opposed to that. Ms. Hardy?
Mayor, members of the council, thank you. I just want to say, we do have to adopt our max tax by the end of September. And so we won't have a workshop to discuss that unless you want to schedule an additional workshop specifically for that discussion. So we will have so this workshop was, we were hoping to get the direction that we needed to prepare that max tax. Certainly if you don't have the information or you want more information, we're happy to bring that back to you. But right now, we were not planning to have another workshop to discuss that. What I will say again, and you all know this, but just to say it out loud, the maximum tax levy is just that. It's the maximum tax levy. So we can certainly set that a little bit higher to give you some wiggle room to make decisions before the end of the year when you would be adopting your budget. So you really have until the end of the year with the adoption of your budget to determine where you want that levy increase to land for 2025. So you have plenty of time to make that decision. That doesn't need to be done tomorrow or next week, but for maximum tax purposes, we need to certify that to the county before the 30th. So we would have the two meetings, September 9th and September 23rd, I think. And if we need to add another workshop to discuss, we're happy to do that.
So it seems like you potentially, if we are considering raising it slightly, that we look at the slightly raised one in September, because later we can reduce it back down to 12.47 if we want to, but we can't do it the opposite.
Thank you, Chad. I think that
Yeah.
kind of summarizes it.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that approach as well, of looking at the option, the other option. And
Yeah, a slightly increased tax levy, just to kind of see what that does to our future and what it does to our rates.
If we take the 14.65, I think for 2026, which is what I think what 12.47 does to it, what does that do for the next 4 years? That would put more money in the bank for the roads and lets us understand exactly how much we'd be reducing spikes then, and maybe reducing next year. So we double the tax levy from last year roughly at 14.65 or a little less than that on max levy, and then be able to see where the road money that we're putting away goes and what it does for the future of that project. If we need a number, that's the number to use.
14.65.
Yeah, because that's the levy number that we'd be using for next year.
That would be 26, yeah.
That's 26's levy number that that you'd be talking about. So, if we're gonna raise it, I'd raise it that number. I wouldn't raise it anything above that. But that'd give us the dollar amount that we'd be using this year. And then anything that we increase it between 12.47 and 14.65, we just add to that $400,000 number. And that goes in that just goes into the street fund. I don't see why we know what staff needs. We know what this is with $400,000 in it. I don't know why we would try to add anything else to the budget that's not being asked for. If we're not going to pare anything down
Okay, I
so if we're not going to pare anything down and the staff budget is a staff budget, then all we're talking about is a road budget, which is right now at $400,000. Because any reduction to this number reduces that number, unless we're willing to reduce what staff needs to do their jobs. And I don't think we've talked about that, but I don't think anybody back here wants to reduce that number. So $400,000, what we're talking about is adding to the street fund, not reducing a staff budget. Because that's what that number is. The 12.47 has $400,000 set for street fund. We increase it, any amount that we increase this should just go to the street fund, and that we're just putting more away. And
Understood, yeah, understood. Council, do you have a dollar amount or a tax levy amount that you're willing to, that you want to take a look at, that you want staff to bring back for us to consider? Are we looking at another $100,000? Do we want to know what that 14.65 would do to our street fund? Thoughts?
Well, it's not really the street fund, it would be what we're doing then, how would that show what the projections for the budget for the next 4 years would be. Because that's what the levy we're using. So then we'd be able to project out what do we need for the next 4 years to do these projects. And we're just taking a bigger chunk of it this year.
Council, anybody have any thoughts?
Do we know what the tax rate we projected in June was?
Sorry, what was that question?
Tax
Do we know what the tax rate that we projected in June was?
7
It's
point,
higher than 12.47, correct?
So the tax rate with the 12.47,
I think we started at 7.
7.49.
yeah, we started at the 7.49, which is what this 29.82% tax rate was.
And that was an increase.
Yeah.
And then
Over
we
the
went-
current, which is 28.4.
0.4.
Don't quote me on that. It's roughly.
And then we went to the 12 to help even out those spikes. And now
And
we're talking
then-
about going even higher than the 12.
So at the 12, it was 30.37.
It is because we got the favorable change in the fiscal disparities. I can get that information to you, what the 12.47 tax rate would be without that fiscal disparities. I think that's what your question is.
That's exactly where I'm going. What would
Okay.
the rate be?
So that, I'll get you that information. I just don't have it available right here.
I mean, I would be comfortable with, if that rate is like 13.1%. I mean, I would be comfortable setting our math level there, knowing that we could always bring it back down to this. We have to come in. We can't come in higher. We can come in lower, but this is our. If we have a deadline of September, this is the time to make this decision.
Yep.
And we can always bring it back down, but we can't bring it back up.
Okay.
And I would just add too that, I mean, I understand where Derek is coming from with the going to the 14.6, I think, or whatever it was in 2026. That's a really big jump, and the whole point was to to minimize the amount of jumps we're doing, and I feel like now if we do that, we're back up to, a doubling of
Yeah.
what we were at. So
Right.
that just seems like I mean,
Because we were at a 9%, 8.99% increase last year. So if you're looking at 8.99 up to 12.47 is, still a jump. So going 8.99 up to 14.65 might be even more of a jump.
Do we have consensus for finding out what what that tax rate would be with that fiscal disparities bump? And
yes,
taking a look at that for a max tax?
yes.
All right, very good. Do you have what you need from,
Yes, I believe so. I can get you that information tomorrow. Dana can send it out to you.
okay, very good. Any last comments on this? I don't want to rush anybody. This is big stuff. It's important stuff.
No, I'm fine, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Seeing no further discussion, there are no other items on our workshop this evening, so may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned. We will gather again at